Hey, welcome back to the stash. By the late 1990s, Spider-Man was in a very different place. The Clone Saga had stretched readers' patience to the breaking point. Sales were failing and Marvel itself had declared bankruptcy. Comics were not only struggling to feel relevant, they were struggling to survive. And then in the year 2000, Marvel tried something bold. A new imprint, a new continuity, a new chance to introduce these heroes to a new generation of readers. And at the very heart of this experiment was one book, perhaps the very best book of the experiment, Ultimate Spider-Man. Written by Brian Michael Bendis with pencils by Mark Bagley, Ultimate Spider-Man wasn't meant to replace the classic run, it was meant to reimagine it. To give modern readers the same thrill that kids in 1962 felt when they opened Amazing Fantasy 15 for the first time. And somehow, it worked. Not only did they modernize Spider-Man, the series became one of the most beloved runs in the character's history. So today, we're looking back at Ultimate Spider-Man, the book that reinvented a legend. From why it connected so deeply with readers, and to why even decades later, it still matters. Before we get into that though, I want to take a quick second to say that here at The Stash, we're trying to reach 16,000 subscribers before the end of the month. Now, it's a huge ask, I know, but with your help, I also know we can do it. So if you like Spidey or just comic content in general, feel free to stick around and maybe hit that subscribe button. But with all that being said, let's jump right back into the video. Now, to understand why Ultimate Spider-Man was created, you have to understand Marvel's situation at the time. The 1990s nearly killed them. The spectacular boom had inflated sales to artificial highs, and when the bubble burst, the industry collapsed. Marvel then filed for bankruptcy in 1996. The X-Men and Spider-Man were still their biggest properties, but even those comics were weighed down by years of convoluted continuity and messy editorial decisions, not to mention how they really weren't helping themselves on the Spidey side of things. The entirety of the Clone Saga in particular had left fans frustrated. Instead of attracting new readers, it drove many away. And for younger audience, kids who had grown up with the Spider-Man animated series or were discovering superheroes what was there, the mainline books were nearly impossible to jump into. Marvel needed something new, something fresh, and so that's where the Ultimate line came in. Editor-in-Chief Joe Quesada, hate him or despise him, wanted to reintroduce the Marvel heroes without decades of baggage. The idea was simple. Start from scratch. A new universe, a new continuity, modern settings, modern storytelling. If you'd never had read a comic before, Ultimate Spider-Man would be the perfect place to start. And at the center of it all was Brian Michael Bendis. At the time, Brian Michael Bendis wasn't a household name. He wasn't the Marvel architect he'd later become, shaping entire events and defining characters for decades. In the year 2000, he was best known in the indie scene, working on crime and noir-inspired comics like Jinx, Goldfish, and Torso. His style was different from most mainstream superhero writers. His series tend to be more on the slower and quieter side of things, with him being far more interested in conversation than explosions. He leaned on sharp, naturalistic dialogue and character-driven storytelling that's become iconic and linked directly to his name. There's even certain instances of dialogue that you can just easily tell is written by Brian Michael Bendis. But for Marvel to hand him Spider-Man, their most important character, it was certainly a risk, and I'm sure there were questions like, could this writer known for small-scale, moody dramas handle a superhero icon? Paired with him though was Mark Bagley. Unlike Bendis, Bagley was already a proven name at Marvel. He had won the Marvel Tryout Contest in the 80s and gone on to a lengthy and beloved run on The Amazing Spider-Man. He also got a lot of recognition from his time on New Warriors, but for me personally, his time on ASM was where I truly knew him from. Bagley always had a style that was dynamic yet approachable. His figures were always clean and expressive. He could nail a big superhero splash page but also draw a quiet scene of teenagers talking and make it feel just as alive. That balance made him the perfect artist for what Ultimate Spider-Man needed, and that's really where the magic happened. Bendis' slow burn storytelling and dialogue heavy scripts needed an artist who could carry emotional weight without losing momentum. Bagley's pencils gave Bendis' words the energy they needed, and in turn Bendis' writing gave Bagley's art a sense of humanity that grounded the entire spectacle. And I love how this series wasn't just about Spider-Man fighting villains, but also about Peter Parker, a teenager living through all the struggles of growing up. Together the two formed one of the most consistent and impactful creative teams in comic history. They stayed on Ultimate Spider-Man together for 111 issues straight, setting a Marvel record for the longest continuous collaboration between a writer and artist on a single series. For over 100 issues, readers could rely on the exact same creative voice and the same visual tone and the same guiding hand. That consistency is one of the biggest reasons Ultimate Spider-Man worked. It felt stable, dependable, and personal in a way most superhero comics never managed to. When Amazing Fantasy issue 15 introduced Spider-Man in 1962, his origin was told in just 11 pages. It was fast, efficient, and instantly iconic, but Bendis took a different approach, an approach that I honestly really enjoyed. The origin of Ultimate Spider-Man stretched across 7 full issues, with Spidey not leaping into action fully realized until issue 6. It was slow, deliberate, and character-focused, and it really benefited the series in my opinion. It gave us the time to get to know this Uncle Ben and Aunt May, so in turn the eventual death would shake us up like it would to Peter. We also spent proper time with Peter before he ever put on the mask. We saw his awkwardness at school, his bullying at the hands of Flash Thompson and Kong, his bond with Aunt May and Uncle Ben, and his quiet friendship with Mary Jane Watson. So when the spider bite finally came, it felt earned. When Uncle Ben died, it hurt more. All because we lived with these characters in a way that earlier comics never allowed us to. This was the magic of Bendis' decompression. Some called it too slow, but to me, it gave weight to every moment. It turned Spider-Man's origin into a fully fleshed out story as opposed to just setup. And for new readers in the 2000s, this was revolutionary. But one of the biggest strengths of Ultimate Spider-Man was how it redefined Peter's world. Aunt May now wasn't just a fragile old woman who'd conveniently suffer a heart attack every time Peter wasn't giving her enough attention. She was sharp, independent, and witty, the kind of person who could raise Peter with both love and firmness. In the 616, I kinda got sick of Aunt May, but here, she easily rose to be one of my favorite side characters. Mary Jane Watson here wasn't the party girl of the original continuity. She was Peter's best friend, his confidant, the person he trusted most. Their relationship became the very heart of the series, more than any fight with a villain could ever achieve. And some of the moments they share within this comic are truly something special. Norman Osborn, on the other hand, became something darker. He's a manipulative corporate monster who embodied the greed and corruption of the modern era. Then the supporting cast like Gwen Stacy, Kong, and others helped ground the series in a real contemporary high school setting. I only just wish Kong hadn't taken all the best qualities of Flash Thompson for himself. Through it all though, every choice Bendis and Bagley made was about bringing Spider-Man closer to the lives of actual teenagers in the 2000s, and I believe it worked extremely well. Across its run, Ultimate Spider-Man reimagined classic storylines and villains for a new age. The Green Goblin was turned into a hulking, terrifying, mutated beast. Venom was tied to Peter's parents and Eddie Brock's family, making the conflict deeply personal. And then someone like Carnage became a horrifying byproduct of science gone wrong. But beyond the Rogues Gallery, Bendis covered nearly every corner of Peter Parker's mythology in some form. We saw new and fresh takes on the Kingpin, the Enforcers, Shocker, Electro, the Sinister Six, although that one kinda sucked. Even the Clone Saga was reimagined in a way that actually worked. There were crossovers with the X-Men, the Ultimates, and arcs where Peter wrestled with his place among other heroes, and long stretches that were just as much about high school drama as they were about saving New York. And eventually, we got the end of his story, the death of Spider-Man. After more than a decade of issues, Bendis closed the book on his Spider-Man in a way that both felt tragic and inevitable. Whether it was the right choice is still up to debate, but I for one personally don't mind it. The way it was done was a little sloppy in areas, and you could tell that he cut some corners just to get Peter in the most do or die situation possible. I mean, like, who knew that the fire hero should not fight the fire villain while the ice hero is right there? But the overall execution besides that was pretty well done. The last few pages were genuinely memorable and emotional, and I think that's all you can ask for when it comes to something like this. I wish this Peter and MJ got a happy ending, but at the same time, it's nice to have a run with a proper stopping point. unless you include the mess that came after it. I guess it helped too that for some, myself included, it felt like this series needed to end. It got way too convoluted for my liking, and post-Bagley era didn't really interest me much. But back in relation to the death of Spider-Man, it was a conclusion that still hit hard, because us the readers had grown up with Peter issue by issue. From an awkward teenager to a young hero willing to give everything for the people he loved. The series though really shined for me in its quiet moments. Peter struggling to balance homework and heroics, from his complicated relationship with MJ to his friendship with Gwen, which became one of the most emotional threads of the series, until they later ruined that. I will say though, a part of me just doesn't include the issues without Bagley as a part of my headcanon. I usually just stick to whatever he was drawing is what I like to read. Because whatever came out of that might have some good moments here and there, but overall in my opinion, it just was nowhere near as strong as what Bagley and Bendis made together. Them two working as a pair just nailed everything, especially when it came to how Peter's world shaped the entire series. Like I just said before, from MJ to Gwen, but also especially to Aunt May. She in this series was so captivating. I love the therapy issue. It's all just furthermore proof that for Bendis, the fights were secondary. The heart of Ultimate Spider-Man was always the relationships. That's what made the series resonate, and that's why so many readers, myself included, felt like we were so connected to this version of Peter Parker when we read it. Now, I need to be upfront here. I love Ultimate Spider-Man, if you couldn't tell already. Before I'd even gone back and fully read all of the Amazing Spider-Man, this was the series that pulled me in. I was hooked from the very beginning. Following Peter's journey, issue after issue, is something I'll never forget. It spoke to me in a way no other comic had before. When I was 16, Peter Parker felt real to me. His awkwardness at school, the weight of responsibility, the feeling that one mistake could ruin everything, those weren't just plot points. They were the same things that I, and I'm sure many others, were struggling with in my own life. I found a sense of comfort that no other comic provided. I also think a major reason as to why is because of just how well Bendis made everyone and everything feel real. He nailed the setting, the dialogue, the characterizations, everything. Even after it's been out for nearly 2 decades, even after when I go back to do my countless reread, the book gives me flashbacks to high school because it was just so good at depicting what it's like. Not to mention his friendships, his relationship with MJ, his arguments with Aunt May, it all felt incredibly familiar. This series made me feel less alone, and I thank it for that. Seeing Peter stumble, fall, and somehow keep going reminded me that I didn't need to have everything figured out. It showed me that growing up is messy, painful, and confusing, but that doesn't mean you can't keep moving forward. And I can't talk about this series without mentioning Mark Bagley. His pencils defined Ultimate Spider-Man just as much as Bendis' writing did. It's literally impossible for me not to imagine his art when thinking of the title. There was something so clean and expressive about his work. Every emotion on Peter's face, every swing through New York, every quiet moment with MJ felt alive. Bagley gave the book an energy that never dipped, even across more than 100 issues. It was also across those 100 issues or so in which he became my favorite Spider-Man artist of all time. I adored his work in this title. It's next level, and because of all that, Ultimate Spider-Man has always had a special place in my heart. It's not just another run of comics I happened to enjoy as a teenager, it's the one that solidified my love for Spider-Man. It's the book that made me want to explore the character's entire history and understand why he mattered so much to so many people beyond that of my childhood admiration. And I'll admit, I'll always defend this series under Bendis and Bagley, especially the first 50 or so issues. That stretch is one of the most consistent, heartfelt Spider-Man runs we've ever had. Bendis and Bagley built a world around Peter that felt alive, that felt like it could go on forever. And for me, that's what makes it so unforgettable. Runs like that don't come along very often, and I don't think we'll ever see another one quite like that again. Ultimate Spider-Man properly exceeded expectations. It became the backbone of the entire Ultimate Universe. Bendis and Bagley's 111 issue run together set a record for the longest uninterrupted collaboration between a writer and artist on a Marvel series, and my god was that earned. Their consistency gave the book a stability that the other titles in the line never quite matched, and the influence of the series went far beyond comics. We had the incredible video game based directly off the series. The movies seem to consistently take elements from this series as opposed to the 616, and perhaps the biggest result of this series was the creation of Miles Morales. But even today, it's incredible how you can still see the fingerprints of Ultimate Spider-Man everywhere, in movies, games, and how new readers discover the character. So how does Ultimate Spider-Man hold up today? For me, it holds up remarkably well. The decompressed style that Bendis used has its critics for sure, but here I believed it was well and truly in the title's favour. The slower pace gave weight to Peter's relationships, made every consequence feel real, and gave the series room to breathe. Not to mention, the art still shines with Bagley's timeless pencils. His characters are just so expressive, the action is clean, and his version of Spider-Man still feels definitive. There are moments later in the run where the quality dips, as with any long series, but those first 50 issues, in my opinion, remain a masterclass in modern superhero storytelling. They're accessible to new readers, meaningful to longtime fans, and emotionally powerful for anyone who has ever felt the struggles of growing up. Now, I think it's clear that Ultimate Spider-Man was more than a reboot, it was a reinvention. It reminded readers why Spider-Man mattered. It gave a new generation their own version of Peter Parker, and it proved that the heart of the character, the kid who learns that with great power comes great responsibility, can resonate in any decade. For me, this run will always be special. It made Spider-Man feel personal in a way that no other comic has. It showed me that even when life feels overwhelming, you can still get back up. And no matter how many times I read this series, the charm, the same feeling, it's all always there. So does Ultimate Spider-Man hold up? Absolutely. Not because it's perfect, but because it captures the very thing that makes Spider-Man timeless. The relatability, the heart, the humanity, and the reminder that even the smallest kid from Queens can carry the weight of the world on his shoulders. Spider-Man!